You were never going to be loved the way other gods were loved. That was decided long before men carved your name onto shields, long before generals raised bronze to the sun and begged for victory. Some gods are invited into homes. Some are thanked at harvests. Some are praised in songs, painted in gold, crowned in flowers, softened by beauty or wisdom or charm. You are not one of them. You are born from war's oldest truth. That power can thrill and disgust in the same breath. Men call on you when they want blood, then curse you when blood arrives. Cities pray for your favor on the eve of battle, then blame your name for the screaming that follows. Even among the gods, you are not admired so much as tolerated, useful when violence is needed, embarrassing when violence becomes honest enough to show its face. That is your life from the inside, not glory, not honor, but the terrible intimacy of conflict, the heartbeat before impact, the roar that makes brothers kill brothers, the rush of force, so pure it almost feels like prayer. You're not the strategy of war, not the noble excuse, not the banner afterward. You are the wound while it is still opening. 1. Born in the house of power. You are born into Olympus, but even there you do not belong cleanly. Your father is the Sky King, ruler of thunder, addicted to authority. Your mother is the Queen of Heaven, sharp with pride and grievance. Between them, the air itself feels armed. You're not raised in softness. You're shaped in a household where power is the native language and tenderness is always at risk of looking weak. From the beginning, people try to decide what you are before you can speak. A prince, a weapon, a mistake, a necessary force. You grow fast, angry, restless. Other divine children may gleam with talent that can be praised at feasts. Yours is harder to domesticate. Your instinct is forward motion. Your joy is collision. You do not merely want to win. You want to feel the world resist you. You want impact, noise, heat, the electric certainty that something real is happening because something is breaking. And even as a child, Olympus notices. Some gods laugh at you. Some step around you. Some use you as the dull explanation for every ugly thing in mortals. It is convenient to blame you for violence, as if violence did not already live inside kings, cities, fathers, and frightened men. As if war were a creature that descended from heaven instead of something mortals build patiently with pride, greed, insult, hunger, and fear. But you make it visible. That is why they hate you. Not because you invent bloodshed, because you refuse to perfume it. 2. The god men pray to and pretend to despise. When you come into your full power, the mortal world becomes your mirror. This is where your story turns bitter. Men say they admire courage, duty, sacrifice, discipline. They build poems around noble battle. They praise commanders who win decisively and priests who bless righteous violence. But beneath every polished speech lives something more feral, something closer to you. The appetite to dominate, the intoxication of force, the thrill of seeing an enemy fall and knowing your own fear has survived another day. They do not want to admit how much of themselves belongs to you. So they split war in two. Its clean face goes elsewhere. Its dirty face goes to you. When battle is framed as strategy, law, order, or civilization, other names receive the credit. When battle collapses into frenzy, panic, gore, and uncontrollable rage, that is when your name is spoken with disgust. You become the god of the part everyone uses, but no one wants publicly attached to their own soul. And yet they call you constantly, before raids, before sieges, before duels, before revenge. Young soldiers whisper your name because they are terrified and want fear turned into aggression. Kings invoke you because conquest sounds holier when attached to a god. Armies were symbols that promise brutality with divine permission. Entire cities walk into blood with your shadow over them. Then afterward insist they never really loved what you represented. You learn early that being needed is not the same as being honored. You are essential in the way fire, is essential. No one hugs a flame. No one crowns it with gratitude once the house is ash. 3. Even the gods prefer cleaner lies. Among mortals, you're used. Among gods, you're judged. That may be the greater insult. Because Olympus is not peaceful. The gods are not moral in the way they pretend to be. They manipulate, seduce, punish, betray, interfere, destroy. They start chain reactions that bury kingdoms and call it fate. They ruin lives over wounded pride and call it order. Yet somehow you become the shameful one, the obvious one, the god too blunt to hide behind elegance. Your greatest contrast is not with weak gods. It is with wise gods. Others can turn war into strategy, protection, righteous necessity. They can clothe violence in rhetoric. They can explain it until it sounds almost beautiful. You do not bother. You are what battle feels like when speeches burn away. That makes you intolerable to those who prefer their cruelty dressed in intelligence. So Olympus gives you a role, but not respect. You are summoned when needed, dismissed when inconvenient, mocked when your temper outruns their decorum. There are stories where even your father seems less proud of you than amused or irritated. A son too direct, too loud, too eager to make visible the savage mechanics everyone else prefers to operate behind the curtain. And because divine hypocrisy is still hypocrisy, even love becomes tangled in conflict. You desire fiercely. You attach with the same force you fight. Passion comes to you armed. Affairs become scandals. Intimacy becomes another battlefield. Not because you do not understand longing, but because you understand it too intensely. Everything in you runs hot. Anger, lust, pride, loyalty, humiliation. There is no cool room inside you where feelings can become philosophy. You are not built for calm. You were built for impact. That is why even when you love, people still hear armor. 4. The field where your name becomes honest. If Olympus is where you are judged and the courts of kings are where you are exploited, the battlefield is the only place where your nature becomes fully legible. This is where your story stops being abstract. Dust rises. Horses scream. Bronze flashes. Men who were boys yesterday grip spears hard enough to crack their own hands. Commands are shouted, then drowned. Shields collide. The first line breaks. Somebody falls. Somebody runs. Somebody loses a brother and becomes an animal in an instant. And there you are, not as a distant god sitting above the clouds, but as force moving through bodies, through terror, through momentum, through the moment fear turns into attack, because attack feels less humiliating than waiting to die. This is why your presence is both intoxicating and disgusting. Battle does not merely produce horror. It produces exhilaration. That is the part civilization lies about most often. The pulse of being alive at the edge of annihilation. The awful joy of overpowering another will. The chemical seduction of surviving violence by becoming better at it than the man in front of you. You know this truth more intimately than any poet of honor. You know that war is not sustained only by ideology or discipline. It is sustained because, once unleashed, it offers a terrible kind of clarity. Everything becomes simple. Kill, live, advance, endure. For beings tired of doubt, simplicity is addictive. And that is why your name spreads across battlefields. Not because you make war noble, because you make it irresistible. Men enter combat believing they're fighting for land, kings, pride, justice, family, revenge, destiny. Sometimes they are. But once blood starts moving, many of them cross into your domain without realizing it. They stop serving reasons and start serving the pure logic of force. That is your kingdom. Not war as policy. War as appetite. 5. Wounded, mocked, and never allowed to be small. The strangest thing about your life is this. For all your violence, you are not invulnerable. Stories remember that. They remember you bleeding, crying out, retreating wounded, being caught in humiliations that make later generations laugh. And those stories matter because they reveal the cruelty at the center of your role. You are expected to embody force, but when force itself gets hurt, everyone finds it absurd. They do not grant you the dignity, they grant quieter gods. There's a reason for that. People can romanticize war most easily when it stays symbolic. Once war bleeds, once it limps, once it screams, once it reveals itself as pain rather than pageantry, people become uncomfortable. So when you're wounded, they do not treat it as tragedy. They treat it as embarrassment. They laugh at the blunt god who brought too much reality into the room. But pain does not make you lesser. It makes your story more honest. Because conflict is not clean for the one who rules it either. Violence wounds the violent. Rage burns the body that hosts it. Every life organized around collision eventually learns the cost of impact from the inside. You are feared as a source of harm, but you're also a prisoner of the same energy you embody. You can no more become peaceful than a storm can become still by moral effort alone. This is what born for war truly means. Not just that you are good at battle, not just that others use you there, but that even your humiliations happen publicly through the same force that defines you. You are never allowed to step outside your function and become merely a son, a lover, a brother, a wounded being, a god in conflict with himself. Everyone insists you remain the war god, even when war has already cut into your own flesh. 6. Never for peace. In the end, that is the real tragedy of your life. Not that you are violent, not even that you are feared, but that peace is never allowed to belong to you. Other gods can contain contradictions and still remain beloved. They can be cruel and beautiful, wise and ruthless, seductive and destructive. They are granted complexity because the world needs them to be more than one thing. You, however, are reduced, simplified, pinned to the ugliest face of conflict, as though conflict has only one face. So history remembers you the way frightened societies always remember uncomfortable truths, as something necessary but shameful, intimate but denied. Kings need you. Empires use you. Soldiers feel you. Poets condemn you. Priests sanitize around you. Families bury their dead and blame your name for what ambition, vanity, fear, and greed created together. And still, despite all that, your presence never disappears. Because war never disappears. That is why your story survives where prettier myths fade into decoration. As long as men want power more than peace, as long as insults outweigh restraint, as long as nations find reasons to send the young into meat and iron, part of the world will always remain yours. Not because you are loved, because you are repeated. You are the God people invoke while insisting they hate what you stand for. The God hidden beneath every polished speech about necessary violence. The God who arrives when negotiations fail, when pride outruns wisdom, when fear decides it would rather kill than kneel. Born for war, never for peace. That does not mean you never wanted peace. That is another misunderstanding. Even fire, if it could speak, might confess exhaustion. Even a blade might envy the hand that is allowed to rest. But wanting peace is not the same as being shaped for it. And your whole existence is shaped against stillness. Wherever you go, tension follows. Rivalry follows. Heat follows. The possibility of collision enters the room before you do. So this is your life as Ares. Not the life of a glorious conqueror. Not the life of a noble protector. Not even the life of a villain in the simple sense. The life of a god who became the face of mankind's ugliest honesty. The part of war no speech can cleanse. The force every civilization uses while pretending to stand above it. You are not remembered because you brought peace. You are remembered because peace kept failing, and every failure sounded a little like your name.